Are you really being your authentic self at work? Or are you stuck in an endless cycle of people-pleasing, perfectionism, terrified of making a mistake? Let's get real for a minute. We're constantly told to be ourselves at work, but how many of us are actually doing that? Too many of us are biting our tongues, smiling politely, doing our best to keep the peace, even when it's killing our integrity. We avoid conflict like it's the plague, thinking that we're keeping everything harmonious. But here's the truth. There's no harmony when you're suffocating inside. In today's episode of Lead with Levity, we're tackling these unspoken fears head on with senior executive coach Colleen Slaughter. Colleen left for Paris at age 21 with no money, no plan, and guess what? No French. Talk about bold. Since then, she's worked with Fortune 500 companies and even Nobel Peace Prize recipients to help leaders crush their self-doubt and their limiting beliefs. So here's what we're going to dig into today. Why do we avoid difficult conversations? So here's what we're going to dig into today. Why do we avoid difficult conversations? What are we so afraid of? And how do you actually show up authentically when all you want to do is hide behind professionalism? If you've ever felt like you're selling yourself short at work, this episode is going to be your wake-up call. We're going to talk about trust, vulnerability, and setting boundaries that no one wants to talk about, but everyone needs. We're going to talk about trust, vulnerability, and setting the kind of boundaries that no one wants to talk about, but everyone needs.
It's time for a sneak peek. Sneak peek, sneak peek.
I believe it's by one person at a time becoming more and more awake to who we really are. And that's where authenticity comes in. But to do that, I need to also be really genuine in that. And that's why I don't mind acknowledging all my foibles and vulnerabilities. I'm not trying to, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to be a hero being me. But I also know I'm in my sole purpose.
When you're feeling the pressure, take a moment to step back, pick up your marbles, and choose to lead with levity. Join us on the Lead with Levity podcast for fireside chats that will fill your bucket and help you get back to being the leader you were meant to be. Now here's your host, Dr. Heather Walker.
Welcome back to the Lead with Levity podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Walker, and I am looking forward to this next conversation with Colleen Slaughter. Colleen is a senior executive coach with a little bit of a rebellious streak that I'm sure that we will get into. She left for Paris at 21 without money or fluency in French, which is bold. That is a bold choice. But it later defined her career in leadership development. She's been helping Fortune 500 companies and Nobel Peace Prize recipients. And as a managing partner at Authentic Leadership International, she specializes in helping leaders overcome self-doubt and limiting beliefs. So, Colleen, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm getting more and more excited as I'm sitting here with you. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Giving those vibes. There you go.
You are giving the vibes of calm and funny, because usually I have the feedback I give the psychological safety, but I feel it with you and just already projecting into the conversation. I can tell it's going to be fun.
Nice. I can tell it's going to be good too, because your story is amazing. So I have an uncle who's Swiss, and when we were kids, we met, and he didn't know any English at the time, and I didn't know any French at the time. And one thing that's beautiful about children is they don't really need to know, right? Mm-hmm. We found a way to still play, and we told each other that we were going to learn each other's languages. This was a pact that we made. He went on to learn English, and he's very good at English now. I went on to try to learn French, and it's still very très mal. It's very bad, very bad. Yes,
better than you think. Yeah.
So I'm in awe of what you've done, because I know how intense that can be when you leave the train station from that London to Paris trip, and you leave the train station and you go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Or you
Totally
hop,
different world.
yes,
Yeah.
that overwhelming feeling of, wait a second, I know only a few words. I can say baguette and I can say s'il vous plaît, and I don't know how to get anywhere. What do I do now? So what was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, you know, a combination. On the one hand, I think a big part of me was seeking something completely different. So it felt refreshing,
Yeah.
exciting at first. And it was only probably a few weeks into it where the panic button hit. Right. And I was staying with a French family who were lovely. And they spoke, well, the son, who's my age, he spoke English, but he refused to do so with me because he thought I should learn it. So basically, I was in this environment with really kind people, but who did not speak, who would only speak French to me.
Ah.
But what's interesting is that older man, so the father of the one I just referred to, he became a very close friend of mine. He was like a surrogate father for years until he died. So part of that was just our, as you were describing with your uncle, it was this, you know, as children up until the age of 4, for the most part, our language doesn't make a lot of sense because we experience the world through feelings. So it's that whole probably feeling safe in that relationship. As long as we feel safe, then it doesn't matter really if we necessarily speak the same language.
Ooh.
I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's exactly has been my experience.
Yes, yes. I haven't heard it articulated in that way before, but it
I
makes
actually just
sense.
figured it out as you were speaking.
Yeah, we're gonna
I
write that
just
down. As
figured I
long as you
did
feel
not.
safe, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Well, and you know, I was reading something today about it, and you know, similar but related topic around learning, and I mean, a different but related topic around learning, and that's what she said. She said we're not fully open to learning until we know that we're not wrong for the mistakes we've made. It's not about being wrong. We've done the best we can with the tools we have, and for me, that can be applied to anything, right? I can be more comfortable really looking at myself and what I could shift in myself if I know I'm not bad, right? And I mean, now we're getting maybe more deeper or more esoteric, depending on how you want to see it. But I figured out that was true for language. Because actually, in that first stay, so the way it happened was the exchange program had put an ad in a French newspaper and said what families want to host these American college students coming over for a semester. And I went to another family that said, whatever you do, don't speak French to us because it hurts my ears. Right. And so
we're like, this is going to be a bad experience then for all of us.
She said, you can only use the kitchen in certain times. You have to stay in your bedroom when you're not there or in the bath. It was like, oh, wow. So it was such a joy. Like, I didn't care if they told me to speak Swahili if I was going to be around warm people. Right. So.
And how else will you
and I've
learn?
never met anybody that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true. And plus he was hilarious. So he had me in the main gentleman I'm referring to became like my surrogate dad. He was just always laughing, had me in stitches, always making jokes. We used to walk, like I know Paris in and out now.
Yes.
Because we would every Sunday from not only that semester, but I went back multiple times to live in Paris. And Sundays were our day. And we would just take off for 4 or 5 hours walking in the city. And he would show me all the little ins and outs because he spent his life there.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a relationship.
That is so cool. Tell me this. So several years ago, we took a trip to Paris and we went with my daughter, had the baby stroller, the whole like caravan of things that in America that you bring with you when you go outside.
Daughter. Exactly.
Yes. And we said, we're going to go somewhere and we're going to get on the bus and we're going to make it happen. And we went to the bus stop and we waited for the bus and the bus came and the sign on the bus matched the sign on the side of the street, but the bus passed us. And we said, yeah, that's odd. And let's wait for the next one. And it happened maybe 3 times before we said, I guess we're going to have to walk. We clearly don't know how to capture a bus here. So how do you catch a bus in France? Someone told me and I forgot. I'd like to record it now so that I never forget it ever
Yeah,
again.
well, to be really honest with you, I have no answer. What I can say is probably you did everything right, and for whatever reason, it sounds like the driver just doesn't want to stop.
Oh, okay. Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's France. So, as an Anglo-Saxon who's been here over 20 years, I say Anglo-Saxon because not only US Americans, Canadians get shocked, Irish get shocked, Australians get shocked, English get, right? You get the picture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what the world? But in our Anglo-Saxon way of thinking, where the customer is always right, or we at least try to find a solution that's a win-win, it's rare here. It's very rare.
Wow.
A few months ago, I was arrived an hour early at the train station because I'd been in Paris for a workshop and I wanted to get home. And I knew there was a train every hour because I live in Lyon, to be clear. So it's a 2 hour train ride, and there's a train every hour, usually between the two. And I couldn't find it on the machine. And I'm going, where is this train? I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
know I had a modifiable ticket. It should have been really easy. And I saw it up on the board, but I couldn't see it on the machine. So finally, I go over to the train and I said to well, I don't think it was the conductor, but some of the people working on it, hey, do you have room in your train? And he said, yeah, I have lots of room. I go, well, why isn't it showing up on the board,
Mm-hmm.
on the machine? He said, well, we're actually Trenitalia. So an Italian train line, which was a screen, because this is brand new that now the French train line has a competition.
Mm-hmm.
He got out of the train, walked with me to the machine, and helped me. Like,
Wow.
this would happen, and especially not in Paris.
Wow.
I was completely shocked, and I had to tell this story to so many people. Like, it does happen. They do go out of their way at times. They really do. No, I'm being, but it's true. It was quite a big deal. That was a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all I can say is I'm really sorry on behalf of the people who live here, and we're somewhat used to it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, we're somewhat used to it. It doesn't get, well, it doesn't get less irritating, but it gets less surprising. Let's say that. Yeah. There can be strikes left and right. There can be just people just decide not to show up. Yeah, can happen a lot.
Yes.
The reason is it's a reverse psychology. So we think okay, if I'm a service provider, I think, aren't I lucky that the client is there? They help me, right?
Mm-hmm.
They help me progress. It's the reverse for them.
Oh.
The client should be lucky that they're there.
Ah.
Yeah,
I'm here to save
it's
the
a whole
day
different
for you.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a whole different view. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think it's an interesting segue into what we're talking about today. Showing up as you at work. And what does that look like? What should that look like? Because there are a bunch of different camps here. You have people who use the label of authenticity to say, well, I'm just being me. I'm just being my authentic self. And you should take it or leave it. So when you're working with leaders and you're helping them with Authentic Leadership International, what do you typically see? Do you see this in your practice where you have leaders who are kind of like maybe misinterpreting the intent behind authentic leadership?
That's a good question. Actually, no. What I see a lot of is a lot of people holding their tongue beyond their own integrity with themselves, let's say. In other words, to their own detriment. So there's a lot. Now, it depends what culture, because I work across so many different cultures. There's some, like, in general, and by the way, this generalization, so it doesn't mean every single person in every single culture, right? It's a general. Overall, in France and Germany, for example, they're very paternalistic. So it's very almost like, and it's a human thing, by the way, to project our family stuff at work. Of course, we know I find myself doing it and I already know about it, right? But it's set up that way in a sense in these countries I just mentioned. For example, the boss is coming, we have to say yes. We don't dare say no. I recently, last year, worked with a French big boss who had spent years in Madrid, several in London, and he came back and he was shocked and he's French, but was shocked at how it was. And mainly what was shocking him is he would make throw a question out to the team and nobody would answer, or they would yes, sir him. But he really wanted genuine, I'm not sure that will work. What about this over here? He wanted a genuine brainstorming, and nobody was daring to, quote, challenge the boss.
It leaves you feeling like, okay, do I have a plan that's good? Or are you just telling me it's good because you're afraid of me?
But that's exactly right, because he had enough, and he's a leader from the heart, which in my book is exactly what is true authenticity. Is really not just leading from the left brain, but the combined left brain and heart. And he was that, and he genuinely knew he didn't know everything, and he wanted to have their expertise involved in co-creating the best solution. So it was a bit frustrating, but that was also at the root of designing a workshop so that we could entice them, inspire them to really feel like one team, and then be able to co-create that together. So that's an example of what in those cultures. In a culture like the Netherlands, however, the Dutch are really advanced, I have to say, of most of the cultures I've worked with. And a lot of them, you might know that. I didn't know this before I moved here, but the Dutch are very blunt. They just direct, they say it. So there's never a wondering what they're thinking, which is great, which is a great thing.
Yes.
I was on not a podcast yet, but I was speaking to someone that I will be on her podcast. And most of her audience is based in the US, right? It's women leaders based in the US. And a lot of them, in a sense, there was a conversation for us around what is woo-woo, right? Because there seems to be a certain norm about what one talks about or not. And this is interesting for me as a US American. I haven't been part of corporate America in over 20 years, right? So this is interesting for me because that feels foreign to be like that at work, right? To be on guard in a sense, or feel that there's only certain things we can say. So I'm sure the example that you brought in, I'm sure it also comes up. And if I were going to put a title around all of it, it's like, well, what is genuinely, like you said, authentic, right? What does it really mean to be me? And because I need to say it for me rather than because I need to feel like I have to be right or I have to dominate or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is your intent in the way that you're presenting yourself in right now? Do you have any intent? Are you thinking about how others are going to perceive this? If you're trying to convince them to do something, how that message is going to be viewed based on how you're presenting it. There's so much that sometimes when I see people who come in with a misunderstanding of what it means to be authentic, they're also not being intentional about how they show up in the workplace. So it's very interesting to me to hear that what you're seeing is actually, no, there's a lot of people out there who are just afraid of speaking up. There's a fear, right?
No question. Yeah.
How do you walk them through that?
Well, the first thing, and it really depends on if it's a one-on-one conversation, right? Or if we're doing a group workshop or something like that. But no matter what, it starts like what we were saying earlier, right? The psychological safety. And my comfort zone is enormous for being vulnerable. It's just, I don't really have anything to hide. And so I often get the feedback, well, wow, that was so inspiring or so. But for me, again, it's just, I have a big comfort zone in sharing. I'm just used to that. But that's something that I'm told helps people feel more at home. Because I also know I'm not perfect. I mean, my goodness, I'm first in line with messing up a lot, right? And I don't have shame around that because I really love Nelson Mandela's, what he said about it, right? I don't never lose. I either win or I learn. So everything becomes about learning. And so first there's the safety, then there's the role modeling, the vulnerability usually, because that whole power of vulnerability, Brene Brown, right? That is spot on. I mean, in terms of how we can create connection even with ourselves and with each other. And that connection is key. In fact, I'm wondering, because I love that you use the word intention. I love it. That's a word I use all the time. Definitely I ask people rather what's your intention rather than what's your goal or expectation. But the other word is connection. And I'm just wondering, and I've never made this connection, no pun intended, But as you were talking, that perhaps that's the key to true authenticity.
Connection.
Yeah, connection with ourselves, like really connected, not just, for example, this, you can tell me if we're going too far down another
No,
road,
it's
but the
cool.
example that comes up for me are values. So this is often a module we'll look at because this is where we get meaning, right? When we know truly not only what our values are, but what our aspirational values are too. But when I first started off on this road of deciphering what really are my values and what are the values I aspire to, I was still shooting on myself about the values I thought I should have. Okay. And because I wasn't connected to myself, so I wasn't being fully authentic. In fact, ironically, the name of my company, Authentic Leadership International, many people told me what you see is what you get with you, Colleen. You're totally genuine. You've got to have that in your company name. But you know what? The value I was really living up until a few years ago was the value of wanting to be liked, people pleasing. So the opposite side of the coin.
Yeah.
It was a painful realization, really, because I felt like a fake. And that was the one thing I didn't want. It was the one fear I had is I would look ridiculous or be fakey, right? That's never what I wanted. But it wasn't until I really got connected with myself, and that's a whole process depending on the amount of trauma that we haven't processed, and there's a whole big thing around it, which I don't mean that disrespectfully, say whole big thing and push it. Those of us ready and willing to work through that, wow, this world much better. But anyway, my point is, it wasn't until I got connected with myself that I could even get real and say, what are you doing? This isn't your value. Your value is more authenticity. Then I had to practice living that, right? And then I could step more into, after a while, well, what are the values I really aspire to? Like, I'm not living them, but I want to live them. But none of that would happen if I didn't take the time to get connected to myself and be connected with others, that I could trust them, that they cared about me when they gave me that feedback.
Now, did something happen that caused you to take a step back and say, whoa, wait a second, I'm people pleasing, I'm not actually being authentic?
Yeah. There was a series of things. So it was the summer of 16. So what was that? Almost 8 years ago. I can't believe it. Time flies. And it was the first time I was in, let's say, a development program for a facilitator network that I had just started becoming part of. It is full of facilitators that I admire. They're here to truly give the best so that the world will get better, will improve. And I had a realization in the middle of that training. Like, I just felt like already I was going in with the imposter syndrome, which I know, having worked with leaders all over the world, I'm not alone. I know that. Nonetheless, I felt really conspicuous because here I was with very high level facilitators that can feel energy, can read energy. So I felt completely exposed. And it was actually a workshop about values, about how to facilitate transformation using values, right? And so it was they say that transformation, though, it's not, us wants to transform because things are awesome, right? If we're thrilled with the way life is going and the results we're getting, why would we change anything?
There's risk involved in trying all of these new things.
So
yes.
Why do that? And so I just, thank goodness I felt the pain I felt, because then I became really willing to bridge the gap. Now, it wasn't just because I decided to be more authentic that I could do it, because I needed to understand, well, what does that mean for me? That's actually a pretty big ask. And that's why my website, right, is not Authentic Leadership Internet. It's Bolder Moves. It can be a bit confusing, which I totally get. However, what I started to see is how courageous it is to truly be ourselves, especially in this world. Because to say what we really feel, like you're saying, but because it really is us saying it with the intention to create a better relationship, better results, right? Whether it's better relationship with myself, better relationship with the other person, or better results, which is going to be that. It still can be really challenging, right?
Yep.
You asked me earlier, okay, what would I do when I kind of got sidetracked? But okay, there's the safety, the role modeling, and we usually cover trust and what is trust building. Because then, and this is based on the Patrick Lencioni model, which you probably know, right? Starts with trust and then moves into constructive conflict. If I only have 10 minutes for constructive conflict, which is by far not enough, but sometimes we get squeezed, right? The one thing that I try to land is the Mandarin word for crisis. And I don't speak Mandarin. And actually, it's not even a word, it's two brush strokes.
Okay.
One is danger, and the other, okay, I'll say it.
Like, are you waiting
Opportunity.
for me
It's
to
okay.
come up with
Yeah,
this?
it's okay. I was just more engaging. Yeah. I would be waiting all day if somebody asked me. No worries. Yeah, no worries. So danger and opportunity.
Danger and
And usually people
opportunity.
are shocked. Yeah, like why opportunity? Well, it's an opportunity to understand what's important to me. Because usually when I get triggered, and especially when I'm in the fight, because, triggering, we go into fight, flight, or fight,
Yes.
freeze. And when I'm in the fight mode, I'm angry, obviously. So usually that means someone's crossed a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is it that I'm so connected to, right? That feels that it's in danger, right? I
Yes.
learn more about the other person can learn more about me. And I get to learn more about what's important to the other person. And together we get to create something different based upon what works for both of us. If I did my usual people pleasing, pretending, then it's the passive aggressive stuff that comes out later.
Yes.
Little snide
when you're tired
silent
and
treat.
you can't take it anymore.
Yeah, it gets nowhere. And usually because there's a way to break it down and understand, well, what happens when we don't want to have these conversations? Because there's a way to have them, as we know, that's really, I'll use the word loving, right? That's really kind, that brings in that responsibility for how I'm feeling and how I perceive things. And is that true? But even before that, when we ask the participants, 99% of the time, it's what's the reason? What's the value you're afraid will be at stake? And nearly always it's harmony. And the idea that most people have is that the harmony on the outside, someone will be mad, someone's feelings will be hurt, there'll be separation between us. And then ask questions. So, how harmonious is it if you're not exactly?
Yeah. What about what's going on inside of you?
Internally.
Yes.
How honest is it with the other person? How really it's going to catch up in one way or another in the relationship. So you might as well from the beginning clean it, clear it. And that is a lot of work for people. And I get that. It's hard. I mean, I am the age I am, and I've been doing this work a long time. And it's only in the last year or so, honestly, that I can very cleanly, without completely freaking out afterward with myself, set boundaries, right? And in a loving way. And there are a lot of different ways to set boundaries. It could be, no, that's your opinion, but that's not who I believe I am, right? It could be, I really care about you, but this behavior is not okay. There's a lot of different ways, but yeah, it can be really scary. Again, depending on what we've lived in our past, right?
Yes.
That's what stops a lot of people is this false notion that they'd be mean by saying something.
But they're not thinking about the other side of that. So what happens? Let's continue along this path of not saying anything. What does that happen to you? What happens to them? How does that affect your relationship and how things start to erode? I see it all the time in workplaces where leaders are afraid to tell their people that, hey, there's something right here that's getting in the way of your professional effectiveness. Is they're afraid of how the other person is going to respond. They're not sure how to phrase it. They're really hoping that someone else will deliver the message for them. And I think this is an excellent segue into an example that we have, because I'd like to see how this may play out in maybe a workplace setting. You want to go there with me?
Let's go there.
All right, Colleen. Okay, so we have an example of Jake. Jake is a manager who can't seem to just switch off, like always thinking. So sometimes our examples are, you've got this person and they're doing bad things, but what happens when you've got someone who's doing really great things? However, those really great things are still kind of creating this tension, and a conversation needs to happen. So Jake is sending people text messages, emails, nighttime, weekends. Whenever Jake gets an idea, Jake is like, hey, I've got this idea. I want to share it with you. I know it's late. Can you take a look at this real quick? Have you ever thought about this? Jake is just full of ideas and just can't wait to share these ideas with people on the team and with colleagues and all of that. But his constant digital presence is creating this situation where people are starting to feel like we can't really disconnect from work because Jake is always there trying to get us to think about new projects and new ideas and what if we did this, and it always seems like it's never enough for Jake. So in a situation like this where Jake is being authentic, super authentic, and bringing all of these wonderful ideas to the table, but maybe not recognizing the impact that's having on others, where would you go with this? Would you focus on Jake, or would you focus on helping the people who are afraid to say something to Jake?
Well, assuming this would be a group approach.
We can play with the variables. So, Colleen, whatever works for you.
All right, let's start with the first one. Again, creating safety. There's various ways to do that. I would probably use this in the trust part, first of all, because in my words, he's being him, but he's breaking trust, even though he's not trying to.
Yes.
So as we know, there are multiple models out there for trust, and trustworthiness is subjective, right? What makes somebody trustworthy at least is at least a nuance of difference between each of us. So like I've broken trust before without realizing it because I'm focused on another aspect of trust than somebody else might be.
Yes.
So the first thing would be to describe that, right? And have them do a constellation within that team who thinks reliability is key, who thinks intimacy or basically emotions being vulnerable is key, who thinks credibility, and who thinks low self-orientation or not being selfish, right? Not the me. See where they go. Ooh, is there a surprise here? What do you notice? Right? And just have them start understanding what's important for trust. Then have them go to the one where they tend to feel that they're the weakest, right? In other words, usually when we're not even evaluating somebody else in that way, we don't bother with that ourselves, right? An example for me would be reliability. It's not that I'm not reliable, but I'm very often like 2 or 3 minutes late. And for people that are time people, that is a break, right?
Yes.
So I usually go to that. But a lot of people in corporate world go to intimacy because they're not comfortable. You know, if you think about the iceberg, they're not comfortable lowering the waterline, revealing who they really are. But this gives all of them an opportunity to have some more neutral, kind ways to see how everybody operates differently. Because on the one hand, Jake's behavior might be disturbing, but on the other, everybody here has a part, right?
Yes.
Because if people are not declaring what their boundaries are or what they'd love to create together, then they also have a part, right? They're not being fully honest about what works for them and what doesn't.
Yep.
And so we would move from that. And the idea being to truly be trustworthy in an authentic way, because it's never about manipulating, but we become good at all the different parts of trust, or at least better at the weaker ones, so that we are not blocking the path, right, to other people who could be more attracted to us as leaders.
Yes.
And then from the trust, then there's the courageous conversation piece. So that's where we could, introduce that. I usually, when we do that, introduce a model that is it's about me, what I'm feeling, what I notice, here's what I see, this is what the effect on me, etc. But then the suggestion is to actually go and do real plays, not role plays. So to take someone and truly go off. And of course, if there are 2 modules in the world that most people don't want to do, one of them is definitely this one. You can call it courageous conversation, honest conversation, whatever. And there's another one around triggers, and nobody wants to do it. It is almost comical because one can predict the body language. At the end of it, the smiles, the connection, the lightness, amazing. It's really worth all of the frustration to get there.
Yes.
But that's probably how it's set up as a group, right? And if I were coaching the group that's frustrated with him, I would ask them, okay, so what's stopping you from setting this boundary? What is it you want to create? What would that look like? And we would likely look at this harmony value, which comes up all the time. And what does harmony really mean if we're not harmonious inside us? And I would challenge them with gentleness that this is also caring for him. Because when we don't let other people know about the effect they have on us, that's not caring.
Right.
Because we're not giving them an opportunity to have the full information so they can grow.
Yeah.
Right. But with permission, like I always say, look, feedback is never about clamoring somebody at the water cooler, right? It's saying, it's offering, I have some feedback. Would you be open to hearing it? What would be a good time? Right. And that is a way to help people be ready to hear it. So that was probably what I would do for them, just depending on how the conversation went, right, in the dynamics.
Yes.
And then for him, I would ask him what impact does he think he's having? That might work better to do a 360 interview actually before and be able to hand him the anonymous results.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, would probably be better because he seems to have a blind eye.
And doesn't realize all that excitement. Not everyone is
Yeah,
as
well,
excited as he is.
yeah, and it sounds like he's a mover, right? In the David Cantor model, where you have a mover and bystander and the challenger, and there's a fourth one. I think it's the implementer. I could be getting wrong, but anyway, the point being, he's got the ideas, but he's not necessarily following through or slowing down where he can look up at the balcony.
Right.
So that might be another opportunity, is have the team go into the different roles and see that all 4 roles are really important.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Not just one role.
Yes. And to look at everything else that they're working on as well, to see how does all of this fit within. So,
and what do we want to create as a team going forward,
exactly.
right? What are the values we want to work? How do we want to work together? Like, what's important to us to feel like there's psychological safety, to truly be ourselves in this team? What do we need? And then what do we want to co-create?
Colleen, what keeps you energized to do this work?
Oh, nobody's ever asked me that question.
I'm throwing out lots of questions like that today.
I love it.
Apparently.
Thank you. Well, the truth is, I know I'm in my sole purpose in this work. So really, like, this is me. Now, do I always do it perfectly? I don't think perfection exists. So that's out the window. Do I do it always with my full heart and intention, given what I'm able to produce in a single day, which could vary day to day, depending on, to your point, my energy level? Yes. Well, I really try to live the work. And what does that mean? I don't just talk about this stuff, I do it. So I mentioned the example earlier about the courageous conversations in my own life, whether that's in my professional life or my personal, and I might have my heart in my mouth while I'm doing it and burst into tears afterward, but more and more, I'm more and more me. And I really believe, and it's not about being effective to say, oh, what a great coach. It's not that, but I think the earnestness that I have to really help the world, right? And I believe it's by one person at a time becoming more and more, well, my word is awake, right? Awake to who we really are. And that's where authenticity comes in. But to do that, I need to also be really genuine in that.
Yes.
And that's why I don't mind acknowledging on my foibles and vulnerabilities. I'm not trying to, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to be a hero being me, but I also know I'm in my sole purpose. So I feel that there's a kind of energy kind of like propelling me, do you know?
Yes.
But I also have a really strong self-care program. And I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at too. I'm a huge yogini. I actually did some before we met this evening. Yeah, it helps me. I just feel more space in my body and mind. I meditate a lot, like twice a day. I journal. So I have a really, talking about connection to myself practice. I love music. I have 2 little girls I love to have fun with. I love them. Yeah, boy, if they're not a mirror of how fast time goes, holy cow.
Oh,
yeah,
I
that's
know.
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I just try to enjoy life, and I get to the beach as often as I can because that's where I feel really alive.
Do you surf?
I love to swim, and I love to walk along it as well.
Okay.
So I have a favorite beach, which is in the Dominican Republic. I stumbled upon it literally by chance, and it's one of those beaches where I'm taken to a different place.
Nice. Nice.
And there's a nature preserve on the side, so it's easy to walk there, and there's no traffic, and go sit under a tree and just look at the waves. It's really cool.
And just to be clear for everyone, you live in France. That beach is France adjacent.
There is a beach in the south, to your point. That's true. That's true. The thing is in November, December, it's cold here.
Yes.
And it's never cold there, right? It's perfect temperature there any time of year.
Yes,
So,
yes. That sounds
and I'm learning
amazing.
Spanish. So there's even the Spanish thing going, which I know is already, like, your listeners will be going, what is this girl? Like, is she not have enough international stuff going on?
Well, it makes perfect sense to me that you would add additional languages so that you can reach additional audiences, right?
Well, exactly. And also, I just like it,
Yeah.
right? And when I'm drawn somewhere, so for example, one of the things I love about going to the Dominican, and I haven't been there in over a year, so let's just say I'm not completely exaggerating, but they're so joyful. I
Mm.
mean, in general, they're a people in general with very little bit of money, always smiling, happy. I remember once I was there for a big birthday. It was a few years ago, and I saw this group dancing merengue on the beach, and I
Ooh.
started filming them. Come on, come over, let's dance.
Mm-hmm.
So I danced with them, and of course they were shocked that this green guy can actually dance, Latin dance, not quite like they do, but not far. And he said, the person I was dancing with, he said, "Welcome to the Dominican, where we celebrate life every day. We
Oh.
don't need a special holiday." And that really is that's one of the things the energy I feel, right, that you were saying. And that lifts me up to go somewhere where people are happy just to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot I need to do to kind of get to that point some days. Do you know what I mean?
I
Like,
know what you
yeah,
mean.
it's a complicated world we live in. So for people that feel that, and it's not at all about the material stuff, it's just about having that joy in their system, that is wonderful to be around.
Yes, I feel that way every time I leave, like when I travel. My my mission has been, how do I get that feeling in America? with the 9 to 5 and the schedule that we all typically have. Yeah, how do you bring that feeling back home every single day? Oh, this has been such a good conversation. Colleen, is there anything that you want to make sure that our listeners leave with as a key takeaway today?
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say, well, you teed it off probably without realizing it, but little sparks go a long way. So if we want to bring more joy in, what's a 2% thing we could do right at that
Mm,
moment? So even if we have to sit at our desk, maybe we can face the sun more, for example.
mm-hmm.
It's just an example. Or have a screenshot of a beach or whatever it might be, right? So what's a 2% shift we can do to be more joyful? And it's the same thing with authenticity, right? Any kind of mindset shift, it's going to take some time, and it can get really boring
Mm,
while we're waiting, while we're practicing. But as we know, neuroscience tells us it's the only way to develop neural pathways is through etching them out through practice.
yes.
And so, but it's those tiny little, and there's a book, just to give that gentleman credit, Atomic Habits, but it's not
Uh-huh.
only through that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not only, I mean, this is just a neuroscience fact that this is how we shift. And so just to know that. And that's also why, for me, again, that link with bolder moves and authenticity, because it does require courage or boldness to be more and more us and to
Yes.
feel comfortable doing so.
Yes, yes. And for anyone who's looking that up, the concept is called neuroplasticity. And
Thank you.
Colleen,
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you talk about mindsets that need to shift, what mindsets have helped you, or what mindsets help others to be a little bit more authentic?
Self-compassion. And what I mean by that is it goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning of the conversation. And I'm going to focus on me for the moment because I don't want to assume this for anybody else. But I will say, having worked with many humans, I can pretty much guarantee it's true. But again, we all have our own paths, so I don't want to label anybody. But when I am feeling judgmental of myself, self-critical, then the last thing I want to be is accepting of who I am.
That's true.
But when I'm gentle with myself and I know, hey, I really mucked up, and I'm able to separate essence from behavior, right? Essence, always wonderful, always good, always, no matter what. Behavior, not so much,
Yeah.
at least for this
Like,
season
this
here,
could
right? Not
improve.
always, right?
Yes.
And but the behavior we can shift through
Mm-hmm.
choice. And so that's another mindset. And it's being gentle with ourselves that we did the best we can with the tools we had at the time. That's why we acted like that. And now we have different tools that we get to practice. And so with that gentleness and self-compassion, that's the basis, because I mean, I'm great at lacerating myself. I am. I learned how to do it early on. I developed the art very well. And all it did was get me frustrated and angry and isolated, right?
Yes.
Literally from myself and from people.
Yes, that's a good point.
But when I did the counterintuitive thing, and I'm not saying accept myself like, oh, it doesn't matter, I hurt that person. That's not what I mean at all. I mean to understand that, okay, that behavior wasn't cool, but I am still a good person. I was acting out of my own whatever, fear, anger, sadness, whatever is the thing. So that's the mindset to start, because again, nobody will want to shift if we don't feel safe with ourselves.
That's true.
So it really starts there.
Oh, that's a good end cap for this, because at the very beginning you started with people are not going to be themselves if they don't feel safe. And
I didn't, of course, plan on that truly, but this connecting for me as well, dot connecting.
Yes, me too. Oh, Colleen, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And if anyone is interested in learning more about you and what you have to offer, where should they go?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So in general, my website is bouldermoves.com, and it is BOLDER, like courage. Some people ask as they wonder if it's the city in Colorado. On the first fold of that, you'll see also, if you're interested to get 2 or 3 lines a week, I do what's called a Boulder Move of the Week. It is literally just 2 or 3 lines, because I know we're busy leaders. And you can either go to weeklybouldermoves.com, or in the Boulder Moves on the first fold, there's a button where you can push and then go to that. Okay. So that's the way you can stay in touch with me. And of course, I'm also on LinkedIn. So I know we're connected, Heather, which I'm grateful for.
Yes.
And so delighted in any way you want to get in touch.
Nice. All right. Well, we will definitely have links to all of this in the show notes. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all of this wisdom with us.
It's really been a lot of fun, and I've also learned actually through it.
Awesome.
So thank you.
I enjoyed it too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lead with Levity podcast. To get resources mentioned in this episode and find out what we're all about, check us out at leadwithlevity.com.